Hey everyone, this is Zephyr. One of the greatest things about Foundry is all of the modules from our amazing development community. But it can be hard to sort through what modules you should have installed, and when, and in what situations. So in this video, I'm going to go over the 5 modules that we think you should be running no matter what kind of game you're playing, and no matter what system you're running. All 5 of these modules are completely system agnostic, so it doesn't matter if you're using D&D 5e or a custom system of your own design. These will all work for you, and they are designed to work really well with additional modules. Check the timestamps in the description for each module. And with that, let's get started counting up from number 5. Number 5 is pointer and pings. No matter what game you're running, it can be really useful to facilitate communication at the table. Pointer and pings allows us to hold down a hotkey and bring up a pointer to gesture at various parts of our scene. We can see that there is a pointer that follows my mouse while I have the hotkey pressed. And when I have the pointer up, I can gesture at particular books on this Theater of Mind scene. I can also have the pointer up and I can left click in order to ping a particular spot. This is useful for bringing my player's attention to a particular area. I can also hold down the pointer and right click to drag my entire player's viewpoints to the area that I'm pinging. When you first enable the module or visit the settings in the Configure Settings option, you'll get this pop-up with some information, and then you can go to the General tab to configure your pointer hotkey. By default it is X, your ping key, which again is left click, and your Move Player's View on ping, which is default right click. Note that players will not have this option. It'll only be available for GMs. You can also toggle whether the ping is only when the pointer is active or all the time. And you can push your settings to all of your users, effectively setting a new default for them rather than pointer and ping's default. They'll still be able to configure this on their own though. We can go into Choose Your Pointer and customize it a little bit. By clicking on the names, you can get a quick preview of what the different pointers and pings look like. And you can use the tick boxes to select your pointer and your ping and change or customize the look of it just by clicking through these different options. So if we make those changes and close, we'll see that now my pointer has changed to an arrow and my ping is this rotating triangle. Back in the settings, we can further customize these different pointers and pings. If we click on a name, then we can adjust the different scale. If we want to be larger, we can apply various effects. So again, upping the scale to make it larger. Maybe we want the pointers to be really, really big and really obvious. We can rotate the angle, and if we rotate the angle, then we probably need to offset the grid units for it so that we're still pointing in the correct spot. This offers a pretty large degree of customization for you and allows you to achieve the look that you want. You can also extend or shorten the duration of your pings and change the tint color on a particular pointer if you don't want it to match your user color. You can also animate things with a rotation and scale option. Additionally, you can select the Create New to make a brand new pointer, and clicking on this preview space, you can select different images. There's already some included in the assets for this module. You can also go into your core Foundry data and in the icons and SVG folder. You can find all kinds of different icons available to you and select those and apply different effects to them. This will accept any of Foundry's default tile browser options, so SVG, WebP, and PNG, etc. So whatever you want to use, I would personally recommend using SVG if you have it available, because it's going to scale more properly with the pointer, but it's all up to you. Hopping over to the player view, you'll see that the player's pointer matches their color, and they're able to ping, but they're not able to right-click ping and move the view. The player also has their own configuration settings in module settings, where they can update the pointer hotkey and ping, as well as whether the ping is active all the time or only when the pointer is up. And they can select any combination of pointers in the Choose Your Pointer, but they can't add a new one. If for whatever reason you wanted players to be able to add their own custom pointer, you need to add a permission for that by going into your user management and configuring permissions. Then the setting you're looking for is modify configuration settings. Due to a limitation with vanilla Foundry, this is the only way to allow players to create their own pointer, and it's to directly modify the module settings. So use this with caution, as this is also going to allow your players to change the settings of all of your other different modules. So I would generally suggest not giving this permission to your players or doing it for a limited time, but that option is available to you. So as you can see, Pointer and Pings is a great module for having clear communication at the table, whether you're using theater of mind maps like this bookshelf, or you're going to use a battle map like this cult hideout. So when your players are asking to check the contents of a crate, the two of you can point with the pointer to make sure you're talking about the right box instead of the incorrect box using the pointer system. And you can also ping to draw players' attention to specific areas, or maybe move their whole vision to see where an enemy has come through a hallway and is ready to threaten them. It's a great communication tool and one that everyone should be using in their games. Module number 4 is Dice Tray. And to give you a good demonstration of this, I'm first going to show you how you would normally roll in Foundry. If you're not rolling from a sheet, you've got to use the chat commands for /R and then type in like 1d20. And if you want to add any modifiers or use different dice, you're going to have to use something like KH3 to have keep the highest 3 values, etc. Obviously, you can do a lot with this, but it's a little clunky and can be slow or unintuitive for someone who is new to Foundry, which particularly applies to players who don't spend as much time in Foundry as us GMs do. The Dice Tray module makes this much more intuitive, with a panel of the 7 traditional RPG dice, where you can left-click on the dice to add more to the roll syntax. It will even keep the roll mode syntax that you have specified. You can left-click to add additional dice and right-click to remove them. You can use advantage and disadvantage to keep the highest or keep the lowest of a result. And you can add modifiers by clicking on these different buttons. So it's going to intelligently fill in the syntax that you need already for you, and you can hit enter to pop it out into the chat. And we'll see that it calculates everything just like a normal dice roll. So it's much more convenient and intuitive for players. And you can also just click the roll button to have it pop out. So a much more robust option for adding rolls and doing it much quicker than typing it out. And we can get as complicated or as simple as we want with all of these rolls. Another really powerful feature is if you click on the D20 next to the roll mode, it normally does nothing, but with Dice Tray, it adds a dice calculator. It has a similar interface, but also has much more robust options. Like if I have this bandit selected and I'm in the 5e system, I can, in addition to rolling this d20, I can add the bandit's skill modifier or their strength modifier here, which is going to be a 0 because he has a 0 strength. And we can see a 3 here. We can also add this further, for example, if we want to add in like expertise or something like that for maybe a tool check where for whatever reason this bandit is an expert in using this tool that uses his intelligence modifier. And we can see that it is using his statistics. So this is a really helpful way to bring in some of these more niche roles that aren't as easy to do directly from a character sheet and are clumsy to type out whenever you are in the chat. This comes with a few different options. We can enable the dice calculator, which is that pop out when we click on the D20 next to chat. We can also disable or enable the dice tray itself, which are the little buttons at the bottom of the chat. So again, that is the dice calculator, and the dice tray is down here with these little buttons, so you can enable and disable them based off of that setting. Then we also have the override system option, and by default it's going to be automatic and it's going to detect whichever system you're using, and that's what controls the advantage, disadvantage, and all of these other attributes that come in with your system. If you're using any of these systems, it'll automatically detect it. Otherwise, it'll default to a generic setup, but you can manually set any of these if you're not using directly one of these systems, but you're using something similar with other useful features. For example, if you still have advantage and disadvantage, you may want to manually set it to something else. And finally, there is a cosmetic option to enable pips on the D6 for visual clarity, and that's purely a personal aesthetic choice. So see that it's got 6 pips on it, and this requires a refresh. Our third module is GM Screen. This is a really powerful organizational tool that I like to use a lot, and you'll see that it adds this little button down here in the bottom right of your screen. Upon clicking that, we're going to pull up this nice big panel with a bunch of different windows. And it should remind you a little bit of an in-person or a tabletop GM screen. And from here, we can drag in or configure these different cells to make them larger or smaller. And what we can do with them is we can drag in all kinds of things. For example, if I'm running an encounter and I want to have the bandit captain and bandit stat blocks handy, then I can have those right there. And I can also bring in, say, my player characters, so I know what their AC is and their health pool, etc. So I can keep track of that easily and at a glance. It's very easy to keep organized. Then if there is an item or a spell that is going to be found here, like this test weapon, then I can have that handy and have the description ready to go without having to fumble through a pop-up. You can also have commonly referenced rules like these ability checks handy, so I can have my little GM's cheat sheet for different difficulties or rulings that I don't use very often. If I need more space, I can change the rows and columns a individual cell spans to dedicate more space to these ability checks here. And you can do that with all of these, and it's very handy and customizable in that respect if you need different sizes. You can also put in roll tables, and when you roll on the roll table, you'll see that it actually does pop directly into the chat, so you can roll directly from the GM screen. Same thing with if you're going to roll a check or a attack from one of your character sheets here, and this makes it very easy to run encounters, particularly if you have several of the same type of enemy. Then you don't have to be cycling through each one in terms of using the abilities or checking their statistics. It makes it very easy to keep track of everything. And you can pop out the journal entries themselves and edit them right from your GM screen and save it. Then if you need to make sure that things come through, you can just refresh, and we can clear our grid to bring everything back to that original starting zone. Going into the settings, we can add additional tabs. So I've already added in this rules tab, and it has 4 columns and 4 rows, which is going to be slightly different. And I can adjust what order they come in, and I could also make one like a public tab here. And what I'll do here is I'll change the columns and rows, and I'll make it shared. And shared is going to allow all of my players to see this as well. So take a look at that shortly. Then other settings here, we can choose to display the GM screen as a drawer, or condense the text here, or make other tweaks. So when we save, we'll be able to pull this up, and we can tab through these other tabs, and they're going to remain stored between them all. And I can add these ability checks to the public one, and that's going to allow my players to see that. So if I want to have rules that we commonly reference or need to use, or if there's house rules or table rulings that need to be referenced regularly, this might be something good to have in the public side for players. Or I can have handouts there, such as NPC portraits, or quest line details, or a specific item description. It can be easily accessed for them. When I condense the text, then it's going to make just an image rather than saying GM screen. And if I go into the configure settings here again, and I turn off display as drawer, it's going to get rid of that little button down at the bottom. But have no fear, I can go into the journals and click on GM screen to have it as a pop-out. So whichever one you would prefer to use, those are available to you. And we've got the same functionality that we did as a drawer, just a little less of the layout customization. Here on the player side, we can see we have the player screen button now instead of GM screen. And clicking on that is going to pull up the public tab, because that's the only tab that we have shared. And we'll see that it has that whole journal entry. So again, this is a great way to display a bunch of information for your players. And your players are not going to be able to edit the items that you put in there unless they have edit permissions or ownership permissions of them. And your players can then configure their player screen however they see fit, making it a drawer or a pop-out, or adjusting the heights and opacity. All of those personal aesthetic or visual configuration aspects are available to them separately and independently of your own. And we'll notice that if we go in and they want to bring in a character or something like that onto this public, they're not able to do so. Only GMs can actually add content to the tabs. But again, it's a really powerful tool when it comes to giving players handouts or having quick references for different aspects of your campaign. Module number 2 is Tidy UI Gamesettings. This is another one where, to demonstrate its power, I'm going to show you it without. You may have already noticed some really great changes as we've been going through this, but I'm going to show you even more of that. So we can see we have the standard all modules active, active modules, inactive modules. And when we go to module settings, this is just a massive wall of text of different settings as you go through here. And it's a little hard to parse in vanilla Foundry. There's just so much information here. And especially if you have a lot of modules, it can be a pain to try to find anything. I'm going to go into my module management and activate none other than Tidy UI Gamesettings. And when it activates and refreshes, we'll enter a whole new world of organization. In our settings tab, we can go to our manage modules, and we'll see that there is a big red button to uncheck all but Tidy UI modules, and a check all modules that will allow us to enable everything that we have in the current filter. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to close. But going back to manage modules, we can see that we also have an export module list and an import module list, which can allow us to share our module loadouts with others or store different configurations for different setups, like maybe we have a different building setup versus playing setup. We can also expand and contract additional information about all of our modules, which makes it really easy to see what's going on with each of these modules and whether we want to keep them active or deactivate them, or we want to go visit the GitHubs and get more information specifically. Then, when we go to our configure settings and module settings, we'll see the same beautiful condensed look that we've seen in the rest of the video, where we can expand and contract these modules with a plus or a minus, which makes keeping up with a large module list a breeze. Our final module and our absolutely most important module is Find the Culprit. Find the Culprit is a very powerful tool for identifying what modules are capable of what things in your game and what modules are causing conflicts. In this example, I don't have a major module conflict to show off to you, so instead I'm going to show you how I would hunt down something causing a either unwanted effect or an effect I want to learn more about. For example, here I have these rolling clouds coming through, but for the sake of this example, I want to figure out what module is responsible for that while I don't know. This is entirely possible when you're going on a module installation spree and you install 50 some odd modules and you can't remember what does what exactly, or you can't remember what broke everything. So when we want to use Find the Culprit, we go to Manage Modules, and we'll notice there's this button now that says Find the Culprit. Clicking on that brings up this little menu, and this is going to be selecting our controls. These are modules that you know for sure aren't responsible for the problem, and you don't want to disable. Obviously, the more of these you know, the faster the process will go, but I'm going to do just a few for an example. I'm going to enable the levels suite of modules and set those as my controls. Then when I select Start, Find the Culprit is going to disable every module except for the ones that we selected as our controls. And we can verify this by going into our Manage Modules and scrolling through. You can see that only the controls and Find the Culprit are active. So it is truly disabling all of those other modules. It's asking us if our issue persists. In this case, we're looking for clouds, and the answer is no. Obviously, if you had something breaking, you would be looking for that instead. So now what Find the Culprit does is it's going to enable half of the remaining modules and keep the other half disabled. And then it's going to tell us how many steps are remaining. So no more than 5 steps here. And we're going to see if our issue persists. And here we can see that there are still clouds, And so that means our issue does in fact persist. We have the problem or the issue or the feature that we're looking for here. So we're going to hit yes, and what's going to do is out of those modules that were green or enabled, it's going to deactivate half of them and keep the other half. So looking at this now, it has updated our step count, and it has, like I said, disabled half of those modules, and we can now see that the clouds are still rolling in, so our issue does persist. And then we will end up selecting yes, because again, the clouds are what we are trying to hunt down. And this process is the same if you have a major conflict or you're trying to hunt down a feature. Going down the rabbit hole, we're going to continue this process of disabling half of the modules and checking to see if the issue persists. If at any point our culprit is in the half that was disabled, it is instead going to flip it from being half of the active modules to being half of the deactivated modules until we can narrow it down and finally get our final culprit. And that is how we will know what is causing this. This constantly dividing possibilities by 2 process is the most efficient way to identify a single module issue, and find the culprit is just automating that process for you. We finally arrived at our culprit being FX master, and so that is the module responsible for our clouds. And it's going to tell us we found the culprit, and we can reactivate all the modules or don't reactivate all of the modules. And so I want to select reactivate all of them because I do want to keep the clouds. You would select no if you didn't want that particular module re-enabled, as in if it had a large issue. So now after a little bit of delay, those clouds are going to come back in. And if I want to change that, I can go into my manage modules and find the culprit again, FX master, and disable it or re-enable it. So again, you can use this for hunting down a conflict, and that's going to be probably the most important use for it. But you can also use it if, say, you forgot everything that FX master is capable of. You can now use that information to go check the GitHub, and you can find out that, oh, this effect controls button is from FX master, and you can learn about how you can update those weather effects or change things. And so Find the Culprit is an incredibly important tool for anyone using a large amount of modules or even a small amount of modules for identifying conflicts and identifying key features that you want to learn more about in the inevitable slew of modules that we almost all end up installing and enabling when getting started with Foundry. All right, that is going to wrap up today's countdown of the top 5 most essential modules that everyone should be running in their Foundry games, no matter what system, no matter what kind of game they are running. As we all probably know, there are a ton of modules to get through with Foundry VTT. It's one of the greatest things about the Virtual Tabletop and this community of the wonderful developers putting these modules together. And so I hope that these 5 essentials have really helped kickstart your journey and your foray into modules. And especially our top 2, Find the Culprit and Tidy UI Gamesettings, will hopefully help you with keeping yourself organized and being able to navigate the world of modules with more confidence. As we've established, there are a ton of modules. So if there's another area of modules that you'd like us to cover next or talk more in depth about, please let us know in the comments down below. This has been Zephyr. Thanks so much for watching. Happy gaming and have a good one.